This is Paul Turner, the Immigration Barrister at Imperium Chambers. Today I'm going to be talking about the Covid-19 travel bans to the United Kingdom and the new rules that have come into force. This is a departure from my normal video. Those about the Home Office's attempts to try and usually fail to remove people, or some of the reports on the Home Office, or indeed the need for an amnesty, and instead focuses upon who can actually come to the United Kingdom and what the restrictions are. The reason for this is obvious. It's the coronavirus pandemic and the government's belated, almost year-long wait before issuing travel bans and the implementation of quarantine hotels. At the outset, the government have listed a number of countries, details in the description box below or on the Home Office website, of so-called red list countries and the suspension of the travel corridors that were previously in place. What makes this relevant is today's long-awaited introduction of the compulsory hotel quarantine, something such as countries as Mauritius have had in place for perhaps about a year now. The new restrictions were announced on the 9th of February 2021, and they basically announced that the UK will be introducing managed quarantine hotels. This is something that both Australia and New Zealand, countries that we're quite close to, culturally, etc., implemented in March 2020. Yes, just about a year ago. So you can't be accused, Boris, of acting too quickly, can you? One might ask why it's taken the government almost a year and over 100,000 deaths to implement such a system, but perhaps that's a question for another day and perhaps another video. The regulations, which are law, to legally implement these quarantine hotels were published on the 12th of February, which is obviously the end of the week, and came into force at 4 a.m. on the 15th of February, i.e. today. In essence, the new laws relate to three factors: where the person is travelling from, who they are, and why they are travelling. As to the rules, I'm going to provide a summary. If you want more detailed advice, please contact me or look at the Home Office website. There's an awful lot of information. But I hope to keep things quite short, albeit I know I'm going to fail. First of all travel corridors remain suspended. That means that all travellers from all countries except Ireland face quarantine on arrival unless they work in an exempt job. And you can find details about that, and that's fairly limited on the Home Office site. Yeah. Now, if you are proposing to come from a red list a country that's on the red list, well, in short, you won't be allowed in. Travel is banned for people who have visited or passed through a red list country in the 10 days before arriving in the United Kingdom. And again, you can find a list of that in the description box below or on the Home Office site. This obviously does not apply to British or Irish nationals or those that have residence rights in the UK, more on residence rights below. However, even for these people, there are restrictions depending on which nation they arrive in, something which some people might find surprising in a United Kingdom. In England, they must enter through an approved airport, book and pay for a managed quarantine hotel, so the burden's on you, provide a negative coronavirus test taken in the 3 days before travelling, complete a passenger locator form, quarantine for 10 days in the booked hotel unless exempt, and take a coronavirus test on day 2 and day 8. A positive test will mean that you have to extend the period of quarantine. There are exemptions and they are limited to a very narrow list of jobs, basically people that earn a lot of money or are including hauliers from Portugal, perhaps they don't earn a lot of money, defence personnel, diplomats and those doing essential border security duties, probably the Home Office, that's in code. A further problem is that there are countries that are not on the red list but a transit hub, such as the UAE, for example. Basically, if the plane stops there, you're not welcome in the UK. So you will need to plan your route to the United Kingdom with some care if you really wish to come. Thirdly, if you're travelling from a country not on the red list, you will still be subject to restrictions, but again, they vary on where you arrive in the United Kingdom. For England, if arriving from outside the common travel area, it's basically England, Ireland, they must provide a negative coronavirus test taken within the 3 days before travel, book and pay for a travel test package that includes a coronavirus test on day 2 and day 8, although they can pay for extra for the test to release scheme so that they can have a test on day 5 and stop self-isolating if negative, complete a passenger locator form, and quarantine for 10 days at home with friends or a hotel. It doesn't have to be a managed quarantine hotel. However, in Scotland, the rules are far more strict. Anyone entering the country from outside the common travel area has to self-isolate in a hotel. This is not exactly helpful, where different countries in the United Kingdom have different rules, and where there is no hard border between Scotland and England. It's not like Northern Ireland, where at least you've got the Irish Sea in between. However, there are a list of exempted jobs, but these are quite small, and as I said, they relate to high-paid businessmen, to people in defence, etc. The big news, and this cannot be overstated, is that there are very significant penalties for breaking the rules. Perhaps before people just ignored them. These range from £1,000 from failing to take a coronavirus test, up to £10,000 or imprisonment for up to 10 years for providing false information on a passenger locator form. 10 years is more than you'd get for most manslaughter cases, but the government thinks that belatedly that obviously that this is now important. The question then is that, can I come to the UK if I've got a visa for the UK? Well, if a person holds a visa, they may have residence rights and so be treated as exempt from the red list rules. Unfortunately, the regulations don't provide what residence rights are, but in my experience and having regard to the Home Office guidance, it includes people with existing indefinite leave to remain, limited leave to remain, i.e. students or workers, but not visitors, settled or pre-settled individuals under the EUSS scheme, as well as obviously British and Irish citizens. Well, the next question that rises, well, what happens if the visa that I've got runs out and I can't travel beforehand? Well, in that case, you can apply for a new visa with an extended date and hope that the pandemic goes away. This begs the question, is it still worth coming or applying for a visa to the United Kingdom? This really depends on why you want to come to the United Kingdom and why you need to be here. Indeed, at the moment it's quite cold and wet, so I can't see much of a reason for being here. However, if you are planning to come to the UK, which I consider to be rather pointless if you're a tourist, as everything is pretty much closed, you are going to have to quarantine. So it's not worth coming if you're only coming for a couple of weeks, as you'll spend it stuck in a managed quarantine hotel. And I'm sure that's not likely to be the Ritz-Carlton. If you're coming for a longer period of time, say 3-4 months, it may still be worth coming as long as you're not from a red list country or travelling through one of the hubs which will ban you. If you're planning on moving to the United Kingdom for longer term reasons, it will likely be a matter of timing, such as when your job starts, for example. In short, the regulations are probably the most stringent I've seen since looking back in my history days to the 1900s, save for the 2 world wars. And some people would say they are far too late. Australia and New Zealand, which introduced these things in March 2020, have not had anywhere near the 100,000 deaths that we've had, even though they have lower populations. My advice in short is that if you're planning on coming to the United Kingdom, before you buy a ticket or commit to anything, contact me or another reputable lawyer and see what the options are and whether it's worth coming at this present moment in time. This will be far cheaper than buying an expensive ticket, which is either cancelled or spending unnecessary time and money, because the quarantine hotels you will have to pay for. You will save money with a consultation with me or another lawyer before you actually book the ticket. I am sorry for the length of this video, but these are very major rules that have been brought into force. And I will continue to issue further videos as the situation develops. Hopefully with the rollout of the vaccine, the restrictions will become a lot less and hopefully we'll go back to a more normal way of travel. But at the moment, or as from 4 a.m. this morning, there are new rules. They are very strict. Hopefully the government will stick to them. And there are large penalties if you break them. Please do not fall foul of them. If you have any doubt, please contact me rather than booking a ticket and then finding you're in trouble. I hope you've enjoyed or managed to watch the end of this long video. However, it is very, very important, as it is really the first time that the UK government has got to grips with the need to quarantine, given the coronavirus pandemic and the huge number of deaths, some of which could probably have been avoided had we implemented a quarantine system, say, a year earlier. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Any questions, get in touch with me. Otherwise, do stay safe, and thank you very much for watching. This is Paul Turner, the Immigration Barrister at Imperium Chambers.